Time to get off the hub, boys, because this story is going to leave you more bricked up than a priest chaperoning a youth retreat. So you're probably wondering, where have I been? What's been happening? Why am I fat? Than before. Well, there's a lot of things that's happened over the last couple of years, and it all takes place roughly 4 or so days after I posted my last video. So, you know, like those videos you watch where it's like moments from destruction? That was basically my life. So in my last video, I gave you a tour of my apartment in Osaka, and I had a really nice job, remote in Tokyo. I had the girl, like I said, my apartment was in the center, dream location. I had everything that I wanted in the apartment. I had a big bed, I had a nice sofa that reclines, I had a nice gaming computer, I had all the consoles except the Xbox. And yeah, I was living the dream. I was literally living my dream, and I finally made the decision to start enjoying my life. I'm like, hey, I've worked really hard for this. You know, I've made it further than most foreigners do, because reality is most people get stuck being English teachers and they stay poor and get fed up and leave the country. So literally a couple of days after I posted that video, well, to put it bluntly, my entire department got axed. And so what happened was we had just hit record profits, you know, the usual spiel. And we received a message saying, hey, we need everybody in the Tokyo office. And so I said, hey, look, I'm remote. I don't go to the Tokyo office. I am my own full-time remote guy. I cannot make that commute. And they wanted us to go within less than 24 hours. So I had to be there the next day. So eventually they agreed to let me stay, and they would talk to me over a video chat. And the gist of it is, my company that I worked for, they did some very shady things, and the shareholders found out, and they got sued and lost. And well, in order to recuperate some costs and still provide the shareholders their nice little Christmas bonus, we all got axed. And I was the head of my department. I had a team of about 20 people below me, and one by one, I started getting messages. This is before I got axed. I was near the end. They were like, hey man, I just got cut off. What do I do? What do I do? And I noticed around that time that my access to my computer, my workstation, has all been cut off. And so I knew it was coming to me as well. And I told them, hey, I'm locked out. I'm going to be axed too. There's just nothing I can do to help you. And so I got to the point where I got in my interview, and my exit interview, and they told me that, hey, you know, you are effective immediately, cut off. But here's the thing. What they're doing in Japan is actually illegal, because Japan is not at will. So we're all full-time employees, so they legally cannot access like this. And the company was a foreign company and didn't want to follow Japanese law. So what did they do? They basically said that normally in this situation, you would have to quit yourself for them to avoid any legal allegations. And so the company's like, we're going to withhold your last paycheck. We're going to hold it hostage until you sign a document stating that you're leaving of your own will. And I know what you're thinking, that is absolute BS. And you're right. So I told them no, and a lot of employees said no. Some panicked and signed so they can get their final paycheck. And the company ghosted us. That was pretty much it. We tried contacting. They held our last paycheck hostage. They didn't want to, you know, keep in touch. And they're violating a bunch of laws at this point. And so a couple of us, we all got together and we started visiting like the Labor Bureau. We started visiting, I don't even remember what it was called anymore. It was another labor related thing. And we reported them, and investigations started opening up, and you know, they basically just kind of kept dodging and ghosting. And finally we got the union. I joined a union around that time, and for the love of God, if you're working in Japan, join a union. They have so much power. Like, I cannot stress this enough. If I ever work in Japan again, which I will definitely immediately join a union. And so the union basically brought the full law on them and threatened multiple legal lawsuits, and finally got them to open up. And they're like, oh, we never fired them. We never fired them. Oh, we weren't holding their paycheck hostage. The usual BS. And around this time, like the people that did stay, one of them was somebody that I actually trained from the bottom up. Like, they'd never worked in IT before, and I managed to get him into the company. I trained him up, and he became this super, super obnoxious, know-it-all douchebag guy. I mean, he did have absolutely majestic as fuck hair. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, if you ever see Thor, when he had the nice long hair? Like that. But he's still a dick. And he was the corporate ass kisser. And what really upset me was all the people that he worked with, the people that trained him that got let go, he showed zero remorse. He didn't lose his job. He was kept on there, and so he was just bragging about, well, it was meant to be like, if your skills were good enough, blah blah blah, you would be able to stay. And he was just saying that the company is making the right decisions, so on and so forth. Just basically like ass kissing the corporate nonstop. I'm telling you, like, literally the corporate dildo that he was riding is longer than a CVS receipt. It was frustrating, and sure enough, the leopards ate his face, and he got let go within a month or so later. And I wasn't petty about it. I wasn't a dick to him because I didn't want him to experience that. Like, nobody deserves that. Let's be real here. Even if you are a jerk, but it is what it is. So we go in with the union, and we start having legal court battles, and they were in the wrong pretty much every way, shape, or form. And there was nothing they could really do. All the evidence was stacked up against them. They had no way out, this corporation. But what they did have was, you guessed it, money. And with that money, they stalled, and they stalled, and they stalled. And they were using their insane amount of capital basically to starve us financially, because we had to pay the union in order for them to keep fighting, to be a part of it. And if we get another job, that means that legally we chose to leave the company of our own will, and then they would be able to get off scot-free. And so it was a really crappy situation. But one by one, our numbers dwindled because people were literally running out of money, and they just cannot continue to go to court against this company. And eventually, my time came up as well. I couldn't keep fighting against them for what they did illegally. And at that time, I started looking for other offers, and I managed to find one in Kobe, which I'll get to that in a minute. It was a nightmare, but I eventually dropped out, and the company court case was dropped, and they got off scot-free. And it just goes to show you that even if Japan has these really strong labor laws, it really doesn't matter where you are in the world. Maybe Europe, I don't know, but as long as you have enough money, you can get away with anything. And I watched the lives of a lot of people get destroyed. So fast forward, I start my new job in Kobe, and unlike my last one, which was an international company, this was a full-on legitimate Japanese company. And most of the staff was very warming and welcoming towards me, except the IT manager. She hated me because I was a foreigner. She didn't want nothing to do with me. And she basically did like the typical Japanese power harassment, where she would yell at me in front of everybody else. And she's like a 4 foot tall, 90-pound Japanese woman. And I'm at that point, this is roughly around the time where I began to gain a lot of weight. Throughout this whole ordeal, I gained around 40, 50 pounds of stress, and I got a lot of gray hair now. Like, shit hit the fan hard. And so she would yell at me in front of everyone, and I'm sitting here going, like, I'm literally more than 2.5 times your weight. Like, you really shouldn't do this. And there were times where I almost walked out. I was never, ever going to lay hands on her. Let's be real here. That's not the kind of person I am. But let's be real. Give it the wrong guy, and they would absolutely roll her ass out. That's all there is to it. But she didn't really seem to recognize that I am not Japanese, and I wouldn't respond to this situation the way a Japanese person would. And I did fight back, and I pushed against her, and she hated me for it. But long story short, I excelled at that job. I was freaking Jesus, like Marvel Jesus, and I kid you not, I finally understand why Japanese people work so long. It's because they are freaking slow. It's not because they're hard workers for most companies. Like, literally, everybody there was extremely slow on my IT team. And the stuff that would take me 15 minutes to do, they would take like 4 hours. And so I would always finish my stuff on time. I do like 3-4 days worth of work compared to them. and I would always leave on time, and they hated me for it. They absolutely hated me for it. But everybody else at the IT team loved me because I delivered results and I was fast and I was unbelievably funny and sexy. So they loved me. But long story short, the manager finally got them to deny my renewal. So I was only there for about 4 or 6 months, and I didn't get the renewal. They said my Japanese wasn't good enough and they didn't think I was a good corporate fit. So once again, I was on the hunt for employment, and well, it wasn't going too well. If you ever move to Japan and you want to work, go to Tokyo. Just move there in the beginning. Trust me, there's hardly any jobs for international foreigners unless you're in Tokyo. Like the amount of jobs there is just it's not worth it. Osaka, Kobe, Kyoto, there's very, very few jobs. Just bite the bullet, go to Tokyo. You'll have a much better shot working in IT or majority of fields. So I wasn't in there, so I had to do my interviews remotely through like Teams or Zoom. And I went through interview after interview after interview. A couple of companies offered me the job, but they didn't want to pay me much because they're like, oh, we noticed that you have like a decade of experience abroad, but that's not in Japan, so we're gonna pay you like a new graduate level salary. I'm like, that's not gonna pay my bills. And to keep in mind, like entry level IT jobs for a lot of it is like less than $2,000 a month. Like it's literally lower than an English teacher to start off with, and that's absolute bullcrap. And so, I went through interview after interview, and it was, oh my God, how do I say this? So I eventually got to this point where I was being interviewed by like 5 different people in a room. They were literally dicking me down like some kind of jav, and it's just back to back to back, nonstop questioning. I remember sitting there and I was thinking, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? This is not what I want to do. And verbally, I actually did say, what the fuck am I doing here? And they all heard. And, they probably didn't understand what I was saying, but they do understand what, fuck means. So, yeah, it is what it is. I got up and I walked out. And, well, things started to get worse from there. At this point, I was already considering moving back to America. And there was a lot of stress because I still had my wonderful, wonderful fiance, which, yes, she did agree to marry me. So I kind of left that on a cliffhanger in the last video. I proposed, she did agree, and we're engaged. But she's still in Japan. We're doing visa stuff. Anyways, she was with me the whole time. She got caught in the crossfire, and it's been so horrible for her mental health, and I feel terrible. It's been unbelievably stressful to me, and it got to the point where trying to find a job and your visa, by the way, if you're unemployed, you have 90 days before your visa gets terminated officially. But Japanese systems are so slow that you can kind of get away with it. They won't really notice. And once you find another job, even if it's after 90 days, you can kind of stay. But I was still trying to get one within 90 days. And it got so bad that my skin, literally across my entire body, it broke out in some unique hives that your body forms under a very unique blend of stress. And I looked like I was something out of like Egypt in... what's that story in the Bible where like what's his face split the ocean in half with a stick? That guy right there, and he made like all the people break out in hives and whatnot. I don't know, like that story. That was basically me, except I didn't sleep with any frogs. But my fiance, thank God she was there. She nursed me back to health. I was literally in a not so good condition. I wasn't gonna say I was on my deathbed, but I was not in a good health position, and I was gaining more and more weight because I stress eat. Let's be real here. That's how I cope. And so after all that was said and done, I made the decision to move back to America. And I told her I'm going to build a good life for her here. And we both agreed that we go to America. And I clearly remember the day I bought my ticket. I'm sitting on a giant beanbag chair in her apartment. She's playing Animal Crossing on the Switch. And I look at the screen, the MacBook's on my lap, and I see the buy now for the one-way plane ticket. And I look at my fiance, and I told her, I promise I'm gonna give you a good life. And so I bought the tickets, and she tried her hardest not to cry. She was holding back her tears. I remember her holding the Switch in her hand, and she's like, "It's okay. I'm not sad. I'm just playing my game. I'm enjoying my game." That's what she was saying, and she was trying so hard. And I felt a very special type of failure, knowing that I put her through so much. And at the time, I didn't realize it, but I was going to continue to put her through a lot more. Fast forward to America, and I get a job at a small office area doing paperwork, and it wasn't in the best of areas, or the type of work it was. It attracts certain people that are not very stable mentally, and I had to scrub toilets and clean after mechanics and lots of bodily fluids, and I would wear gloves and whatnot, but I could still feel like the liquid seep through the gloves. And I remember thinking that, how did I go from an educated, college degree, working in IT, to scrubbing toilets? And I did this because you would get extra money for scrubbing the toilets, and for me, all that at the time that really mattered was just build a life for my fiance, build it for her, get off the ground. It doesn't matter what you're doing at this point. You cannot let her down. And I really did feel rock bottom at that time. There was nothing more humbling and humiliating than falling this hard. And when I moved back from Japan, I lost a good 95% of my possessions, and I lost most of my savings because I burned it all trying to just stay in Japan longer to find a job. So I literally had almost nothing. I had 2 tiny suitcases and my MacBook. That was it. Just some clothes and a MacBook. And I was at that company for nearly a year. I want to say like 8 months. And during this time, I wasn't making much, just $17 an hour, which isn't a lot to support yourself. And my fiance, she saw that, and it stressed her out because I was having trouble finding an IT job. And well, it really caused a lot of friction in our relationship, and we got through it. We're still together, but it was a very hard time, and mentally I was stressed. Physically I was stressed. Emotionally I was broken. So I managed to land a job at a company in Texas. The beginning was remote, but there was a little bit of training that was, you had to go through the training before you had to move down there within like 4-ish months. And I was so desperate to get out of IT, or to get into IT, to get back into the field. I didn't really care what it was at this point because I needed that job for my fiance. And the pay was good at about $27 an hour after training. During training, it was 20. So 27, I'm like, okay, once I finish training and I get in, that would be enough. It would be hard. We'd have to budget, but it would be doable, right? My fiance could come down here and we can start our life, and I would maybe get a weekend job. And life wouldn't be hard, but as long as I'm with her, that's all that really matters. So I start, and the training was ungodly brutal. It was the hardest job I've ever done in my life. I kid you not, I worked from on average about 8 a.m. to around 2 a.m. 6 to 7 days a week for 4 months. And it was so hard because most of that was off the clock. You don't get overtime at this company. They told me on day 1 that they will not pay overtime any way, shape, or form, but you would be given work. And if you fell behind, I got pipped on my first week, performance improvement plan, on my first week, because I was slightly behind what they were expecting, with the threat of termination by the second week if I didn't, get my butt in gear. And it took working like close to 80-hour weeks or so to keep up with it. And you also had to get Salesforce certified for 2 different exams, and I passed the first one, but if you don't get certified, you would lose your job. So the cost of failing is being fired. And there's a lot of pressure there, so I had to keep up with the projects. I had to keep up with the studying, because everybody there was learning Salesforce for mostly the first time. And it put a lot of strain because my fiance, she wanted help with the visa. She wanted somebody to talk to. And all these times I just like, baby, I can't, I'm sorry. I'm really trying, but I got to focus on work. I need to work. And it destroyed my mental health. And my weight gain continued. My legs, because I sat for so long, they started to, I don't know, like pulse. I remember laying in bed at night, and the bottom of my thighs, the backside, below that magnificent butt cheeks right there, they would just like pulse, pulse, pulse. I've never felt that before. And I know that there's no way that's a good feeling, but I couldn't really do much at the time. And I got to the second exam. This is almost near the end of the training period, and I failed it. And they let me do a retake. And I remember sitting in the test center just crying, because if I failed, it was basically game over. And sure enough, I failed. And at the time, I didn't really know, but the company did give me a final third chance, but I didn't know it at the time. And I remember driving, and I had these thoughts that you shouldn't have, thoughts about not moving forward in life, if you catch my drift. And I called my fiance when I got back to the house, and I cried on the phone. I hate saying that, I really was crying because I failed her, and I apologized. I'm like, I tried my best. I really did. I worked so hard, and it wasn't enough. And she was understanding, she's an absolute angel. And that made it that much worse that I failed. And so I walked inside and went into the room. I had the meeting, and they said that they'd give me a final chance. And I hated this company so much at this point. It was so much work for so little money and so much stress. And a company that I applied to a while back, but they weren't hiring at the time. They finally reached out to me, and they're like, hey, we have a position open for this role. And I'm not going to say the salary, but it was much, much, much better than what this current company was offering. And so, I was immediately like, okay, you know what? This might be a door, my escape, my way out of it. And long story short, I'm now with this company. Things are definitely looking up. For the first time, I'm not as stressed. The financial situation is taken care of. It's not enough to buy a house, but it's enough that she doesn't have to work when she gets here, and we could stay afloat. And with budgeting, we'd be perfectly fine. And yeah, I really do like the job, but I don't want to get my hopes up. I'm continuing my Salesforce studies. I'm continuing to grind. I know what happens like when you fail, and I don't want her to ever get caught in the crossfire again. So I spend most of my free time still grinding, improving my IT skills, just improving myself as a person, and hope for the best. I don't want to say that we're in the clear, because at any point in time, all the company has to do is say, hey, we don't want you here anymore, goodbye. And that's that. Then I'm immediately tossed back into the hell pit. So I learned my lesson to never, how do I say this? I don't want to say never be positive, because that's not the lesson, but to always be cautious, to always have a backup plan, and don't fail. For the love of God, don't fail. Yeah. So, going back to my opening statement, did that leave you bricked up? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, so what's going to happen with this channel? Now that things are different, I'm no longer in Japan. My content was shifting away from Japan. If you notice, I wasn't going out as often. I was trying to more focus it on myself, doing comedic things. And I'm thinking about doing that now that things are starting to finally calm down. Every now and then, I'm not going to have a regular schedule. I'm going to be honest here. I might disappear for a while. But I definitely want to get back to making people laugh. I want to go back to saying random crap. I want to go back to the good old days where, you know, I never really had a lot of followers, never had a lot of subscribers. 1,000, I wouldn't be surprised if most of them were bots, but for the people that were there, I really did enjoy talking with them, and I did my best to reply. And to be honest, I don't want to be a big YouTuber. Like, I would be perfectly happy if I just had a tiny little core group and they enjoyed my content and, you know, we just hit it off, and that would be nice. If I ever did get big though, hell yeah. I'm sorry, just kidding, couldn't resist. But yeah, that's pretty much the story up until now. You know, don't really know where to go from here. Just things are looking up. Being cautious. That's it. So, thank you for watching, I guess. Yeah, it's been a while since I've done this. I'm rusty as hell. Not even gonna do an outro. F that garbage. Peace.